And when she makes it back to her classmates, Blackstar calls her out for snitching. So she comes up with the bright idea to sneak his ass, as she proceeds to get flipped in the air. And when she gets back up, she punches him in the face. But he eats the punch and tells her to calm down before things get domestic. And then she proceeds to scream out and run away.
Hey man, it's your boy Alex, and welcome back to another bang.
Today, we are talking about Soul Eater, and more specifically, when the DWMA took on arachnophobia. So if you have not yet seen episodes 33 through 36 of Soul Eater, spoiler warnings ahead. And without further ado, it's time to get unhinged. So we start off at the Patchwork Laboratory, where Professor Stein is doing his research, and this man is slowly losing his mind, which doesn't really surprise me, because I would too if I kept twisting a giant gear through the center of my head. But after washing his face and looking at his own reflection, this man sees a demon looking back at him, over here looking like evil Kermit. And during this hallucination, his reflection grabs his neck. So to break out of this genjutsu, he punches his mirror. And at this point, the madness is taking over. So if I were him, I would seek some help. As we cut to him meeting up with Death himself, who suggests to Stein to take a little vacation, to release some stress. But this stitched up lunatic says that there's no cause for alarm, and that he's perfectly capable to still teach his students. I beg your pardon? My brother, the night before you literally tried to punch your inner demon. So in regards of teaching a class of 13-year-olds?
I don't think you have the facilities for that, big man.
And Death was like, whatever you say, bruh. But more importantly, Death tells Stein that arachnophobia is up to no good, and they must be stopped. And with that, we cut to Stein and the students training near their school, and their lesson for today is to practice soul resonance. And at this point in time, not a single one is able to do it. And with arachnophobia back on the move, their time is running out. So in a sick form of motivation, Stein tells them that if they can't resonate souls by the end of the day, they will be dropped from the class, which means that the games are over and it's time to lock in. And with the weapon mice just facing each other, it's time to begin. And with Kid and Maka successfully linking, last up is Blackstar. And the second they try, they fail immediately, but Stein tells them to shake it off and go again. And once again, it's another failure. And instead of giving positive reinforcement, Maka calls Blackstar selfish, and he calls her an idiot. And in order to get these two to stop fighting, Death the Kid had to up the toolie. And Stein has seen enough, so he tells them to take a break. And the moment he gets alone, he starts tweaking again. But suddenly, Maka calls his name and snaps him out of it, as she tells him to cut Blackstar from the resonance team. But Stein says it is not his fault, it's yours. So either lock in or get the stepping. And when she makes it back to her classmates, Blackstar calls her out for snitching. So she comes up with the bright idea to sneak his ass, as she proceeds to get flipped in the air. And when she gets back up, she punches him in the face. But he eats the punch and tells her to calm down before things get domestic. And then she proceeds to scream out and run away. But after Tsubaki finds her and talks to her, Maka eventually understands what she needs to do to become a better leader, as they both crack a smile and head back. And when they finally return, the team welcomes her back as they get back to work. And this time, when they attempt to link, they finally succeed, as the Meisters and their weapons are finally connected as one. And with their final attempt, Stein tells them that they passed today's lesson. And now we fast forward to later that night, where the gang is all walking together, when suddenly, Maka stops and tells Blackstar to get his lick back from earlier. And with no hesitation, this boy walks up and dribbles her into the concrete into the nearest dumpster. And as they all laugh it out, we cut to Arachnophobia's hideout, where Lady Arachne's army is being assembled, including Giriko, Mifune, and Mosquito. So we fast forward to the DWMA traveling to a place known as Lost Island, which is home to a magical tool known as Brew. And the mission is simple. The DWMA is tasked with obtaining this tool before arachnophobia does. And they're split into two teams. One team's mission is to intercept arachnophobia, and the other's is to capture Brew. But there is one little catch. The magical tool is surrounded by a dangerous magnetic field, so this is not gonna be easy. And after they get the debrief, it's time to get active. We then cut to Sid's team headed out to intercept arachnophobia, but as they're walking to their destination, one of them gets sniped in the head. And when Sid turns to see who shot that absolute laser, they are ambushed by arachnophobia. And one of them jumps from the heavens to attack Sid, but he weaves it, pulls out his knife, and stabs him into the shadow realm. When suddenly, through all the commotion, Azusa notices Mifune down below, so he gives Nagus her orders and heads down to take him on. We then cut to Giriko and some of the other troops standing over a ledge, when all of a sudden, they hear a loud rumbling. And when they look over the the hill, they see this man Justin riding down on a snowmobile and followed by an avalanche. And moments later, they are all taken out, except for Giriko, who activates his saw-like ability and cuts the avalanche in half. We then cut to Maka's group standing next to the magnetic field, as Stein instructs the kids to stay there while him and Marie go in to retrieve Brute. He then says that they're not back in 20 minutes, find Sid's group and get off the island. And they better hope they make it back in time, because if they don't,
it's about to go down.
And as Stein and Marie head inside, we cut to Mifune giving people the work. But little does he know, Sid has him in his sights. But as he shoots at him, this man turns around and deflects it. And before Sid could comprehend what just happened, Mifune stabs multiple swords in the side of a mountain, makes his way up to Sid by jumping on them, swan dives from the sky, and slices him in his arm. Now wait a minute, how many swords do you need? This man treats swords like ninja stars. I promise you they are not that disposable. But anyways, when he looks back up, Sid is nowhere to be found, until he pops out behind him and slides down the mountain, but Mifune is hawking him down. So Sid begins to shoot him while sliding backwards down the mountain. When we cut back to Maka's group still waiting outside the magnetic field, and while Killick and Blackstar are fighting over chocolate, Maka notices that Professor Stein and Marie's wavelengths have suddenly vanished. So Kid decides to go in and check it out, but Maka stops him, and while they're discussing a plan, they get attacked from behind, but Ox saves her at the last second, and as arachnophobia attacks, Ox runs up and sends them flying. And now it's Kim's turn, as she blows some of them to smithereens. And with Killick staying behind to help his squad, Blackstar, Kid, and Maka head towards the magnetic field. And now it's really time to get active, as Killick uses Soul Resonance and combines his Fire and Thunder abilities. And moments later, he's weaving attacks and causing mass destruction, as he runs up and yells, "Apex Twin!" as he blows the golem to pieces. And while Killick's team is fighting it out, we cut to Maka's group finally making it through the magnetic field. And when they make it inside, the ruins they were once standing in front of are now mysteriously put back together. When suddenly, when they look towards the sky, they see Lord Death himself. But this version of Death does not look normal. And when he suddenly disappears, the gang heads deeper into the temple. We then cut to Sid still being chased by Mifune, and this man is not letting up. And as Sid tries to escape under the snow, this man Mifune blasts his sword like a grenade launcher. And somehow, Sid pops up 30 feet away with just a scratch. We then cut back to the temple, where the gang notices witches walking past them. But with them being blurry, Kid assumes that what they're watching are events from the past, specifically from the day of the explosion that destroyed the temple, when suddenly, they notice a young lady Arachne walking by them, as they overhear her talking about blowing up Brute and Lord Death. And what's crazy about the gang hearing this conversation is that it took place over 800 years ago. Somewhere else in the temple, the madness is getting to Stein, and he's tweaking out even more than before. And while Marie's trying to help him, Maka's group pulls up, and she tells Stein and Marie to get out because their 20 minutes is up. Meanwhile, Maka's group heads out to search for the tool, and while they're running, they're stopped by Mosquito, who's holding the magical tool Brew in his hand. And they made the grave mistake of calling him old and little, so he begins to chant, which caused the ground to rumble and him to age back 100 years. But they're not even scared, they're genuinely disgusted, and with no hesitation, Blackstar begins to attack him, and he is trying everything, but he cannot get through Mosquito's defense. But when Maka jumps in, he brushes her off too. So Kid starts shooting, but he is also doing no damage. But while Mosquito was distracted, Blackstar hits him with a force palm that blasts him in the air. And then Maka uses his head as a launching pad and slices Mosquito back to Earth. But this man just laughs it off. So Blackstar goes into enchanted sword mode and takes the lead. And while he's distracted by Blackstar, Kid and Maka jump in, but he sends them flying back. And Maka looks up to see this monster charging towards her. And when Blackstar jumps in to protect her, he gets smacked into a pillar, and then Mosquito turns into a fat ass bowling ball and blows through them, and then proceeds to fly through the air and clothesline them into the ground. And while this is going on, Soul is trying not to unleash his inner demon, but with them losing this fight, he might not have a choice. And as the Meisters regroup, Soul tells them they're going to resonate as a team using sound. And after they all agree, Soul walks into the black room, and with the piano in front of him, it's time to get started. As Soul begins to play the piano, the gang activates the resonance link, and as Mosquito rushes in, Blackstar blocks his attacks, and while Kid starts to shoot at him, Maka attempts to cut him, but he blocks her attack. But that was just a distraction, as Blackstar comes in and cuts him, and when he tries to attack Kid, Blackstar hits him again, when Kid comes from the sky and pistol whips him into the ground, and Mosquito is completely baffled, because one moment he was winning the fight, and now he's being jumped by a bunch of teenagers, and while Soul continues playing, they are giving him everything they got, until his defense eventually breaks, and they are smacking the mess out of this man. And the moment Mosquito looks back up, Blackstar grabs him with the shadows, snatches him in, and cuts him. And now it's Kid's turn as he activates Soul Resonance and charges up. And moments later, he fires his death cannon right at Mosquito, causing a giant explosion. And when the dust settles, this man can barely stand. And as Soul continues to play, last up is Maka. And as she powers up, she activates Soul Resonance, turning her scythe into a mega scythe as she charges in and cuts the pillars and him in half using Genie Hunter. And when the battle was over, they went to look for the magical tool which he hid in his hat. But Blackstar realized that at the last second, he detached his head from his body and snuck away. But instead of following him, they head out to leave the magnetic field. And on the way out, they run into Ox and Killick, when suddenly they're blinded by a bright light, which was the projection of the explosion that happened 800 years ago. And after they watch it, they finally leave the magnetic field, where they're met by Professor Stein and Marie, as Kid informs her that they failed to retrieve Brute, and now it's in Arachnophobia's possession. But she just hugs them and says that she's glad that they're all okay. And after Sid finds them, they all head off the island. And after Maka fills in Lord Death on what happened, we cut back to Arachnophobia's hideout, where Mosquito brings Brute to Lady Arachne. But when she asks to see it, he tells her that after being on the island for over 800 years, Brute has lost his function and is completely worthless. And you can tell bro was nervous to tell her because he is sweating bullets. But she said it was all good, because even if it doesn't work, the DWMA does not know that. And now we cut to Medusa's hideout, where Aruka reveals that she has the real Brute, and the one that Arachnophobia has was a useless fake that she left behind. And Lady Arachne has no idea. But that's not all. Medusa then reveals that she planted a snake inside of Marie to eavesdrop in their conversations and speed up Stein's madness. And the more he has to resonate with his partner, the deeper into madness he'll go. And with Brute now in her possession, Medusa's master plan is underway. And with what she has planned, the DWMA is in a world of trouble. Alright, so that's it for today's video. Now, if Soul Eater's your favorite anime, drop your favorite character down in the comments. And don't worry, we got some more bangers coming soon, so stay tuned for that. And once again, I appreciate everybody for watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe as well. It's your boy Atlas, and I'll catch you next time.